We started an accelerator program called Blue Startups in Honolulu. And we are currently part of another accelerator, which is not so much a startup accelerator, but more of a growth accelerator called Elemental Accelerator, formerly known as the Energy Accelerator. But they recently partnered up with the Emerson Collective, which is a big fund in the Bay Area. And so, yeah, I'm here to talk about what we do at the company and some of the technologies that we're trying to develop for the agricultural industry. So, I call it Agriculture 3.0. Other people call it the same thing. Some people call it 2.0, some people call it 4.0, depending on how you're counting. But essentially, we're talking about the next agricultural revolution in this day and age. So to start off with, I'll backtrack, talk about agriculture 1, 2, and whatever that was before. So this is just a picture of pre-agriculture, hunters and gatherers. Everybody's nomadic, small tribes. Settlements only lasted for so long, and populations are very small and can only support a small number of people per location. And then we come into domestication of animals and crops, where essentially we've learned how to irrigate and we learn how to breed crops and animals to our own liking. So we made vegetables larger and tastier and more nutritious than their wild counterparts. And animals were tamed and they were able to be domesticated and kept in pens. And this developed in different areas all throughout the world. And we all know a good amount of world history. For example, in northern Africa, they've domesticated the cattle, which led to larger settlements throughout North Africa and then to the Middle East and Mesopotamia, and came the dawn of civilization, where we were able to support hundreds of thousands of people in one location without everybody having to look for food all the time. And it comes to agriculture 2.0. We fast forward into the last century. So this is in the 1940s and 1950s. A group of scientists in Mexico at a research lab that does crop improvement, and this research lab still exists today, it's very prominent. They've essentially bred some crops, some cereal crops, to be very uniform in height and growth. So this allowed for a large batch treatment of agricultural landscapes. So now we're not talking about 5 acres, 10 acres. We're talking about hundreds or thousands of acres that we can plow with a giant machine and then have a giant combine, essentially harvest 1,000 acres per day, which is a big deal. And so this allowed for us as a species to increase in food production tremendously, and we're able to increase our capacity. And then that leads to the concepts of population studies for our species. So different revolutionary technologies throughout history increases our capacity, or the capacity of this planet to be able to sustain a certain amount of population. And so the graph on the right, as you can see, that's your right now. You can see where the population was increasing a decent amount, but as soon as this happened, the growth rate of the population would increase dramatically. And so this is the inflection point at which the capacity had increased tremendously, and now the population is on its way to catch up to the capacity of the planet. And then there's different ideas about population growth through different economists, especially in the 18th and 17th centuries, where basically there was different empires that were controlling different colonies all over the world, and they were running into issues where there's population explosion in certain areas, a lot of it in Africa and the Indian subcontinent. And they were going through these cycles of boom and bust. So population would increase dramatically, and then there would be a famine or some sort of natural resource lack where millions or hundreds of thousands of people would die either in conflict or in famine. So population would go up and down, and it was very stressful times. And so Thomas Malthus is one of the economists that talked about this a lot. And so his idea was population will increase exponentially while food production will increase at a linear scale. So population will always exceed the increase of food production. And so that leads to a constant era of wars and famines throughout the world. And I wrote down Malthusian trap, and that's one of his concepts where every time you have technology advance, increases human capacity or the capacity of the planet to sustain a population, we will increase the population to that point, to the point that where before and after this capacity increase, the per capita resource is still the same. So 10 bags of rice for one person at this level, but 20 years later, when the population has reached this capacity, we're still at the same point. So overall, we haven't really increased the quality of life on this planet. And the bottom chart shows another population theory called the R strategist versus K strategist. And these are different types of organisms that increase and decrease in population at different rates. So our strategist, seen on the very right with the sharp curve that goes up and then falls dramatically. These are organisms that essentially produce a lot of offspring, that consume a lot of resources, and then die off quickly. So these are things like bacteria and fungus, insects. A lot of these are R strategists. And what a K strategist is the opposite end, where these organisms are producing small amounts of offspring over a long period of time. And so you're looking at different consumption of natural resources according to different strategies. So you would see this a lot in, say, a composting heap. You would have a dramatic increase in the temperature of the compost. And these are our strategist bacteria that are consuming the sugars and what's easily digestible. And then they will drop and you'll see a decrease in temperature. But then the K strategists will start to take over. And these are the bacteria and the fungi that are essentially decomposing things that are harder to decompose, like cellulose and a lot of woody materials that require a lot of time to decompose, but also can sustain a population for a very long time. So when we're talking about population growth, we've seen a huge increase in population throughout the last century. And then that is very much an R strategist curve, which is different from what we've traditionally had, which is more of a K strategist. And so we're at the point where we're talking amongst ourselves, is this growth sustainable? Can we keep on increasing our capacity on this planet to sustain more people? Or is there a cap at which the population can grow no more and we'll sort of like be in an endless state of dire need for more resources, but not being able to produce it? Uh-oh. Okay. So comes agriculture 3.0. We're talking about a digital revolution of agriculture. Now, the digital revolution has disrupted a lot of industries that we see today. So Facebook has disrupted communication. It's completely changed how we talk to each other. I can find old friends and girlfriends from way back when, right? And then we're all connected and talking to people. I'm connected to my friends that are in Africa that I met a long time ago. We can exchange messages daily, and that is completely different from what we used to have. The next little logo is Airbnb. So for people that want to stay anywhere, and we see a lot of this in Hawaii, it's completely changed how we look at accommodations in our tourist destinations. Not only do we have to stay in a hotel anymore, but we can stay wherever we want in whatever neighborhoods, and we have all these choices. And then people have access to all these homes, and people also have access to these markets, so if you wanted to rent your home. So that's a big disruptor in the way the tourism industry works. And then the last one here is, of course, Uber. So completely changed how we travel, right? And then also there's distributed production. So distributed production is a concept where in this modern day and age with advanced information technology, we're able to produce things anywhere we want because the technology's there. So the picture over here you see with the metal sphere, it's a 3D printed metal object, which is virtually impossible, 10, 20 years ago. But now that we have these 3D printers, we can essentially print this anywhere on any island that we want. So that changes a lot. So now we're talking about the efficiencies that we can gain through information technology and all these distributed manufacturing, where we don't necessarily have to produce everything in one location. We can produce everything in our neighborhoods in small amounts and still have that be competitive with the scale of economy that was achieved through industrial revolutions. So, what are we talking about when we say we're going to digitize agriculture? How do we digitize agriculture? Because digitization brings efficiencies in every industry that it's touched. Agriculture is essentially the last place that technology ends up in. This is due to the lack of infrastructure in rural areas, and a lot of farmers are very ingrained to their old ways of life. And so you're not going to walk up to a farmer and say, hey, check out this new app I got. The guy's not going to give you any time of the day. So how do we break into that, and what kind of tools are actually effective and practical for these farmers to use? Because we can talk about IoTs and data and whatnot all day, but at the end of the day, if farmers don't use it, it doesn't mean anything. So one of the earliest digitization of agriculture that we had is satellite technology. So satellite imaging, and this is an image of this place in Illinois, which apparently is supposed to be the most average town in the United States, and they use it for a lot of studies. And so they took a picture from space, and this shows some of the differences in photosynthetic activities and some of the land use data over there. The problem with this is we're talking about pixels, or every single dot on that image is a huge amount of square footage, right? So now we're talking about one pixel representing a few thousand corn plants. And then we move on to the UAVs and drones, which are really popular right now, and there's many companies that are doing this. And so they would fly essentially aircrafts over agricultural fields, and they would take images, and they would put the images through different filters to say, these plants are greener, or these plants are have worse health. And this is great for, yet again, large-scale agriculture. If you're managing 10,000 or 50,000 square acres, or 10,000 acres of corn, then yeah, this might make sense. And then we come into the IoT space, the Internet of Things. So IoT is basically connecting everyday devices or things to the cloud. So we can connect, say, our pen, and that will record exactly how much we wrote that day, for example. And you can essentially connect anything. And the IoT space is what's really interesting for our company. And the biggest challenge in the digitization of agriculture is this rural infrastructure. You can, deploy any kind of technology you want in the city, but when you go to the rural space, now all of a sudden you don't have full Wi-Fi coverage, or you don't even have cellular networks. So how do we connect all these devices that we're trying to gather information from the agricultural field onto our smartphones? So there has been a few IoT networks that has been developed over the last few years, and these two are the most prominent ones. One is LoRa and one is Sigfox. So these are like, if you could imagine a cell phone network, where cell phone networks are made for talking, voice, pictures, videos. It's very robust, and it's made for sending large amounts of information. Now, what these IoT networks do is they're specifically designed for just sending small amounts of information with very low power. So these are some examples of sensors that we use. These are light, temperature, and humidity. And this is temperature and soil moisture. This can be deployed 1,000 feet away from any Wi-Fi router. Now, this is not one of these IoT networks, but this is a closer situation where it's used in a lot of greenhouse and indoor agriculture, where there is a little more infrastructure. But essentially, we're connecting all these devices through large scale. So Sigfox is a network that we partnered with in Hawaii. And so by putting up a base station, you can essentially connect anything that's within 30 to 50 kilometer radius, which is a big deal. And you can connect up to 4,000 devices. And each of these devices use so little power to transmit so little information that essentially you can run a coin cell battery to run a sensor for 2 years, which is a big difference from the traditional weather stations and whatnot that's deployed out there, that you need a large battery system or solar panels, and you have to do a lot of maintenance to upkeep the energy demand. So now we're talking about deploying not large weather stations, but small devices over a large area for very little money, which is a big deal, which is it's essentially a game changer. And so we gather all this data from agricultural spaces. We deploy sensors, we put sensors or trackers on vehicles or livestock, whatever you want. So what do we do with this? So we gather all this data and we crunch all this data through machine learning. And I'm talking to a lot of technocrats here, so I think everybody understands what this is all about. But essentially, you take all this data and you're seeing things that you weren't able to see before at a resolution that you weren't able to see before. So, for example, we can do smart automation. So, if we have sensor data, right, and then we have the ability to control things, whether it be irrigation or your lawnmower, you can marry the two, and you can automate it to the point where the control of these appliances or different things on your agricultural field or in your home, smart home is the same thing, right? You can control them not based on a time schedule that you set up before, but based on actual live sensor data. So like your AC, when it gets too hot, your AC will kick on to bring that temperature down. You can do the same thing with irrigation. So when the soil gets too dry, that's when the irrigation will actually kick on. So it's not based on timing or whatever you thought the plant was going to need beforehand. It's actually based on live data, which comes to dramatic decrease in the amount of inputs that these agricultural fields require. Research can be vastly accelerated. Traditionally, there's a scientist that needs to go up to a data logger or needs to go and observe something and write it down on a clipboard and take it back to their computer in your office, put it down on an Excel sheet. This is very time consuming. These are PhD guys that are going out there collecting this data, spending a lot of this time that anybody could be doing, right? And for example, we have the coconut rhinoceros beetle on Oahu, and they put up all these traps everywhere. Every other tree in the neighborhood has a big trap on it, and there's one guy that goes around the island every day, checking each of these traps and looking how many coconut rhinoceros beetles were in this trap and where the population is and how it's increasing. But now, if we put a tiny little sensor on each of these traps, we just eliminated this guy's job. Now he can concentrate on looking at the data and doing more research with it instead of the manual data collection. So you can see on this picture here, you can put sensors pretty much anywhere to connect anything. So you can put sensors to watch how much water you're putting on your plants, put flow sensors and whatnot. You can put sensors to monitor the growth of trees. Put a sensor to monitor how wide or how thick the trees are getting. You can put a sensor to see how much water the plant is using. You can use a sensor to track how many insects are coming through your field, especially if we're talking about coffee. CBB, coffee berry borer, is a really big one. For example, there's a technology out there that we've been trying to access where if you have a laser in a tube across, and whenever an insect flies through it, the laser will count its wing frequency, its wing beat, and that will identify what species of insect is flying through. The most difficult part about tracking insects on your agriculture field, on your farm, is that you have to go and find the trap and look at it. That takes a lot of labor. And if you try to automate it, there's no good way to identify what insects are coming through. If you don't care about butterflies, but your alarm's going off that there's a lot of butterflies on your field, then you just wasted a lot of time. So that kind of technology allows for identification, which is a big deal in farms and research work. Here's some of the smart automation I was talking about. So once you get a sensor out there, say a soil moisture sensor, and you have a controller that controls a valve or a pump that controls irrigation, and you marry these two through an app on your smartphone that you always carry around, which you have real-time access to data information, and you can control anything that happens on your farm. So now you have smart automation, and you can say, whenever the soil moisture drops below 20%, turn on that irrigation. When it goes over 50%, turn it off. We can do this with anything that has information that can be captured through sensors. And there's smart fertilization. So especially for hydroponics, and a lot of farms do fertigation, which is essentially putting nutrients into your irrigation to deploy to your fields. You can monitor the pH and the electrical conductivity of your water and say whenever that drops to below a certain level, add some more nutrients in it, add some more pH up or down, whatever you want to. And so your system will essentially be never out of sync, right? Somebody could make a mistake and put too much of one chemical inside your water and kill all your plants. These human errors happen quite often. Livestock tracking. You talk to some of the cattle guys around here. Sometimes they don't know where their cattle are. Sometimes they lose a cow here or there. They move cattle from one pasture to another, and one or two of them might be left behind, and they have to get in their truck and they have to go find these cattle. Each of these cows are worth anywhere between $500 to $2,000. So that's a lot of money per cow. So you're going to get in your truck and go find this cow. But how do you find it? It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Crop selection. We're talking about how much things are changing through climate change through the recent years. And while for us in the first world, we have information and we have technology available to us, and we can say, because it's drier and hotter this year than the last 10 years, we might use a variety that is, that can withhold the amount of moisture in the soil with that temperature. Now, if you were, say, in Africa, you don't have the access to information, you don't have the access to technology, you don't have the access to the seed varieties that enable farmers to stay relevant. How do you cope with this deal? Now, by deploying sensors and accelerating research, we can essentially say at every climate zone, everywhere it changes, these are the ideal crops for that climate. So, a banana farmer in Kenya can say, my climate is changing to this. So our agricultural extension from FAO or wherever they be can say, yeah, I know your data. I know exactly what crops that you need to adopt to. Planting and harvest timing. Farmers don't know what other farmers are doing. And it's kind of a secret, right? When there's a crop in season, say apples or mangoes, all the mangoes come into season, come into ripeness at the same time. So the market is flooded at the same time. So your high-value crop is all of a sudden is a not so high-value crop anymore. So for these farmers, it becomes really important to be able to get to the market before everybody and get to the market after everybody. So you miss the bulk of the crowd. And so by being able to communicate amongst farmers more, you can time things so that, okay, say, you're going to take care of the early season, I'm going to take care of the late season, and therefore we have a more sustainable agriculture community. Also with pest movement, if one guy harvests all his watermelons today, the farm next to him is going to get all his pests that day. So all of a sudden this guy is like, where did all these pests come from? I didn't know they were coming. I wish I knew, because when they were coming, I could have sprayed pesticide to mitigate that risk. So by connecting all these farms together, farmers can essentially communicate and exchange essential information that is beneficial to everybody. And environmental impact is an important one, because essentially agriculture is our largest interface, or as a species, or human species, it's our largest interface with the environment. So whatever we do in agricultural space has a huge impact in the environment, whether it be cattle or corn or whatever it may be. So by knowing more about how things affect other things in the environment with accelerated research, we can reduce the impact that we have in the environment. Nutrition is a big deal. We can produce a vast amount of quantity of crops through hydroponics or whatever it may be, but if it delivers less nutrition to the people that need them, then it doesn't make sense. So the other type of efficiency that we can gain is not just through reducing inputs, but also maximizing the outputs by assuring that by adding this nutrients at this timing, we can increase the nutrients at the time that the food is consumed. And that has a tremendous impact in places like, in the third world, in the developing countries where food is scarce or there aren't that many varieties of food that you can choose from. Another thing is there's such a thing called FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is essentially, it's an act that is brought on by the FDA. And this enforces all farms and all food producers to follow a certain code for health, for food safety. And this applies to every farm in the United States and every farm that exports to the United States. Not everybody has to comply to this within the next couple of years, but most people don't know how. And a lot of it is record keeping. You have to be able to say, somebody got sick eating this avocado. This avocado needs to be traced to the exact tree that it came from. And to this day, we still don't have that technology. Somebody got sick with a cucumber in Europe. It takes them 2 weeks before they can figure out where it came from. And during that time, they basically had to dump every cucumber in Europe. And that is a lot of money, and that is a lot of resources. So being able to track that is very important. Organic certification is another thing. It requires essentially record keeping. You have to have records of the last 3 years of your farm being organic or synthetic, chemical free. And most people can't get organic right away because they don't have that record keeping. So as soon as we can keep records automatically through sensors and automatic inputs, the worst thing is if you're running around a clipboard and writing things down every day and you have 50 clipboards in your office and maybe somebody will put them into an Excel sheet at the end of the day, maybe not. And so there's a lot of things that happen on the farm, and being able to keep records through automation can reduce labor quite tremendously. The average age of the principal operators of farms in the US today is about 65. No, I take that back, it's 55. In Hawaii, it's 65. In Japan, it's 75. Now, this is a general trend in all first world countries where farmers are getting older and older and they're retiring, and there's farmlands that are being left alone and being fallow. So in Japan, there are so many farms that haven't been used for the last decade because all these farmers have retired and there's nobody that wants to carry on and take over their farms. So there's been a lot of effort to essentially revitalize agriculture by training new farmers. And we have programs like that here with the Go Farm program and different individual programs that that are essentially trying to train farmers to become farmers, right? Only problem is a lot of these farmers, they get into farming thinking that farming is such a great life that you're gonna go out there and talk to the plants every day and wake up with the sunrise. It's gonna be happy and glory all day. But when they come to it, they realize that farming is actually a lot of work, and it takes a lot of planning, and it's actually a business that needs to be run like a business. If a farmer doesn't make money, the farmer is out of business and there are no more farmers. So how do we bridge the gap of this new generation of kids and technocrats that are coming into the space and saying, I'm tired of Silicon Valley, I want to get back to nature and connect with the land, and they get into farming. And this is where it's important for us to be able to communicate to this new generation of farmers, whether they be young kids or veterans or ex-convicts. They all need some way to relate to the agricultural field that they didn't learn from their parents. Everybody else who's a farmer are multi-generational farmers, so they've been taught how to farm through their parents. And so by developing a smartphone application that connects the individual to the farm through data and some very easy to use UI, UX, the interface, that allows new generation farmers to come in and actually thrive in the space. So this is an example of what our version 2 of our application looked like. We essentially built our early version to accommodate the farm administrator and manager. So you have 1 or 2 guys that are on your farm that has access to all this data and can make decisions, which is great. Now the farm manager has all this information to make decisions that are based on actual information. And then we went into the mobile space with our app. After realizing that, yeah, it's great for the farm manager to have all this information, but we need a participation of all the farm workers to input data, especially when it comes to scouting. You know, you look at your farm, you look at your plants, and you see which plants are not doing well, which plants are doing really well. Or if you see pests or diseases in a certain area of farm, you want to be able to manage that as quickly as possible. Now, if there isn't a good communication system going through from all your laborers throughout your farming space, back to headquarters, and so on and so forth, then you have a delay, right? So if somebody finds coffee berry borer in the southeast quadrant of the farm, and then tells the manager the next day, now you've wasted an entire day that you could have been using management to mitigate this problem. But now this problem has spread to, you know, so many hundred plants, and you've lost a lot of money. So essentially bringing everybody that has a smartphone into the system, onto the account, and communicating can provide great value to farm administrators. So, thank you. Yeah. Any questions? Yes, Jim.
Looking for my notes here. So if I get, I want to get the name of the LPWAN folks, Sigfox?
Yeah, Sigfox.
So Sigfox is who we like here in the Almond Show.
Who I like, yes.
But is Laura also around, or?
Laura is not around yet, and they're a little bit different in technology. So Laura still, the difference mainly is being for the Sigfox, most of the energy demand is on the base station and not on the devices themselves. Nice. For LoRa, the devices themselves still have quite a bit of energy demand. So while it still has a large area network that it can provide, we don't have the devices to be cheaper or smaller as the Sigfox network.
They probably won't last 2 years on a watch battery, right?
Right.
In the LoRa. But for Sigfox, so if I get a Sigfox AP and tie it in my network, and I can support 4,000 devices?
Yeah.
Over 30 meters?
30 kilometers.
30 kilometers.
30 to 50 kilometer radius, depending on your topography.
Better.
Yeah, it's a little better than 30 meters.
30 meters, okay. And I want to check out the sensors you got there, because this is something I want to start playing with tomorrow. But
yeah, so these are sensors that we partnered with a company that makes these. They're called wireless sensor tags.
Okay.
And basically they run off of Z-Wave or Zigbee, one of the two, radio based. And you have a base station that attaches to your router and has a small antenna that's this tall. And this can do up to 1,000 feet line of sight. Okay. So if you run a tomato farm with 20 greenhouses or a 5-acre greenhouse, you can essentially put these sensors wherever you like in that operation. And there's a lot of information that you can get from these, and these are very cheap. This is $20.
Yeah. What makes those?
This is you Google wireless sensor tags, and you can find them. And they're made for the smart home, for the smart city. But there's other sensors as well. There's a sensor that does infrared, so it'll notify you whenever somebody walks by. There's sensors for managing, keeping track of when doors close and open.
That sounds like the key is once you have that layer is pretty inexpensive, right?
Yeah.
Because I imagine an AP is not too terrible. A 6-box AP that I tie in at the appropriate places, and those are cheap. Mm-hmm. So I think it sounds like the expensive part is automating like irrigation systems and valves and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yes and no.
Same way it's all.
Yeah, I mean you can have solenoid valves for irrigation that are connected that you can essentially just flip with your smartphone
but kind of retooling all that is maybe.
Yeah, so
Right.
integrating the hardware is our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, so while there are many cool hardware that are out there, not all of them have open APIs that we can access, and then it turns into a conversation, a long conversation with the hardware manufacturer. When we can say, we can sell so many hardware for you to a completely new market, but then they may not see the value just yet. So there's a lot of conversations that are going with multiple hardware manufacturers, and at this point, it's all about finding the low-hanging fruits that are practical and applicable for the people that we work with.
Go jack my cow.
Yes.
What's the power limitations on the sensors? I mean, they got some kind of battery. This
has a coin cell battery in it.
Lifetime.
So these soil moisture sensors last for a year, and these light temperature and humidity sensors last for 2 years. And then this one you can replace the battery. Unfortunately, this one doesn't have a replaceable battery because I don't know.
For $20,
hardware guy.
Yeah, $20 sensor. It's hard to.
Yeah. Yes.
Is there a small park somewhere where this is operational and someone can look at it?
Not on this island. There's a couple on Oahu, and there's a few on the mainland. We've been working with a few high-value crops on the mainland, mainly in the cannabis space.
So it's cannabis in your slide.
Oh yeah. if you know what to look for. The cannabis guys are sort of by accident the most ideal customers. They have the highest value crop. I mean, if one plant can give you $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 in profit, and then you might want to spend $20 to make sure that crop does well. So it's kind of a no-brainer for these people. And a lot of cannabis growers they're not traditional farmers. They're professional gardeners for sometimes. A lot of times these guys have been working in the black market industry for the last 30 years and have converted into the light side, the side of the light. So, and then there's also a lot of new younger kids that are into this space who mostly don't have agricultural or even scientific backgrounds, and they're looking for things on online forums and hearsay, and you can't really trust all the information that are out there. So these people are very fragmented and culturally they're very secretive, right? So they really want to be able to access their own information and be able to have better control without having to talk to people in between. You don't want to have consultants come in and look at your grow and tell you this and that. So yeah, we've had a couple of really good pilots that we've actually were able to prove that we can increase their production by 20-30%, which is a big deal when you're talking about a $2,000-$3,000 plant. Yes.
Mesh topology or line of sight?
This one is line of sight. Yeah, but also there are repeaters for the base station to expand that network beyond.
That's a fit with Intel's project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's been a lot of mesh networks that were deployed before, just not at the type of scale or cost. Yeah. That's achievable now. Sigfox and Laura are both European companies. I think they both are French, actually, and they've been developed within the last 5 years. Sigfox is the older one, is developed about 5 years ago, and they've been struggling, but they've gotten a lot of funding, and they're deployed in many cities in the U.S., mainly like San Francisco, LA, Houston, Austin. Yeah.
Kona?
Not yet. Not yet. And we might be able to address that issue.
And they're not mesh either? They're line of sight or?
Yeah, they're not available yet. So we're working with a couple of members of the community in Kona to essentially put up a pilot. It hasn't really been used in the agricultural space. They're mostly for smart cities to connect devices in the cities and be able to monitor buildings and whatnot. And so while there are a couple of companies in Europe that are using it for agriculture, nothing outside of Europe. So we want to be able to deploy a pilot Big Island. Big Island seems to be the most ideal for us to do this pilot. A lot of remote communities and a lot less infrastructure. So there might be a lot of uses for this. Yes,
We
Sultan.
get like crop data, and I'm just thinking that there's so many farmers here.
Mm-hmm.
Like for this to be really good, you would have to have like, okay, so this piece of land here produces this much of whatever, and most of the farms are not really one crop, So
Mhm.
most of the farms like I don't know, got 100 different types of fruits and other stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm wondering about that because this one is a great idea, but you need to collect the data.
Mm-hmm.
I think to make suggestions like, maybe this is the area we want to grow macadamia nuts instead of,
Right.
yeah.
Right. I mean, even for the Konokasi belt, the belt is actually going farther up the mountain. Right. The lower elevations are not as productive as they used to be. So different farms exploring elevations that haven't been traditionally farmed for coffee. Because Hawaii has these ahupua'as and all these microclimates, we can essentially test every climate zone along the way to show by data which crops do well in which areas. And so for us, Hawaii is the perfect testing ground because you don't see this anywhere else. With all these microclimates, and also at the same time we have the most amount of soil types out of anywhere. There's something about 13 or 14 families of soil types, and 10 or 11 of them exist in Hawaii, which is the same case with microclimates or climate zones. So, nobody in the world can grow as many diverse of crops as we can. And so for us to be able to have pilots and have test cases in Hawaii is a really big deal. And because we do tropical agriculture as well, my passion is in developing countries, and a lot of them happen to be in the tropics. So what we can do here can directly affect people in the most poverty-stricken areas. And a lot of, basically Africa has leapfrogged in technology and communications since the mobile phone came along, right? Not everybody who's left their own village can talk to their mothers back home, which wasn't possible, 10, 15 years ago. So I spent a lot of time in Africa, 2007 to 2012, where I've seen how much mobile technology is used. And people even send each other credits, their prepaid credits on their mobile to their relatives back in the villages. So all of a sudden, they've created a system where people are instantly transferring money or value to the most remote areas in Africa, which traditionally wasn't being able to do, right? So now we created this entire economy that moves through a digital network, and we can also transmit information for agricultural assistance in this way too. Now everybody has the old Nokia phones still today, but smartphones and cheap smartphones are going to be available for these people within the next decade. So more and more, we're going to see a lot more communication and technological assistance moving towards the most remote corners of the world through mobile phones.
Basically, you need somebody here who would shell out money for some demonstration projects here, and then
Yeah,
That'd
definitely.
be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you guys know anybody with a couple of million laying around. Yes.
So where are you in the process? You've been through an accelerator.
Yeah.
You've developed some, at least prototype software, maybe more than prototype software.
Yeah,
There's a
so
couple pilots.
we're actually going to have our smartphone app in the Apple App Store within the next 2 weeks. It's going through the approval process right now.
That was the right question to ask.
I didn't feel that. So it'll be in the App Store. We're doing a soft launch where we're not really advertising. We're just telling our friends and families and people in our networks to start using. And then we're going to work with the bugs and the kinks, work them out, make sure the interface is acceptable to everybody. And we've done small beta pilots here and there, but we wanted to open up to a larger audience. And then once we get the feedback and we're confident, then we're going to market and advertise and say, everybody should be downloading this. Yeah, and then as far as hardware goes, we've been, a year ago we were struggling with a lot of the hardware that we were using at the time. There wasn't the type of infrastructure or things were just not aligned the way we needed to be. There's a lot of issues with 3G networks that we were working with back then, and this is before we started working with Sigfox. And so we went from the outdoor space into more of the indoor and the small-scale agricultural space. Essentially, wherever people are using controlled environments to grow their crops, they have infrastructure. They have to have power to control the environments, and if you have power, you'll have Wi-Fi, right? So now we're working with these sensors and a few other sensors and a smart socket company in Honolulu called IBIS. And the IBIS, basically, it's something that plugs into the wall, and you can plug something else on top of it. So it's something that goes between your appliance and the wall outlet, and that's connected to our smartphone app. So you can turn anything on and off through your phone, and it also monitors the amount of power that the outlet uses as well. So now that we can connect that, we could say connect the water pump, a submersible water pump, into that. And for hydroponic systems, a lot of times that's what you use. And we can turn on the pumps whenever the plants are feeling thirsty.
So are there sensors available or being developed for tracking microorganisms? And I'm just trying to think of coffee bear borer, for example.
Yeah.
And each one of these different, and how about the ohia fungus? Is that something that this might apply to it?
So there's a lot of correlation between pathogen and pest movement with climatic conditions. Mm-hmm. So one of the ideas out there is that coffee berry borer will follow humidity that moves up and down the mountain, and then left and right across the valleys and whatnot. And so that's something that we could definitely provide data to researchers to keep track of coffee berry borer movement. But it's not something that you can do without the data, right? Once you have this type of resolution of data, once you have not just one sensor per acre, but now you have 10 sensors per acre, you can see a better resolution, you can see a better picture of what actually goes on. And till this day, nobody knows how rapid ohia death is spreading and why it's not coming over to this side and whatnot, right? So it's definitely a tool that different people can use in different ways. And for researchers, I think actually I was talking to my friend yesterday who he was telling me that he talked at Kona Science Cafe a couple of years ago. He worked with Opihi, and he talked here because his professor that he worked with became ill and called him up 5 years after they did their research together and said, hey, I need you to go down there and talk for this thing, and you're the best person for it. And then so he's over here working with some local summer programs that bring in students to do a lot of outdoor education. And
Talking about Chris Bird.
oh, his name is Nick Velasco. I don't know what his professor's name was, but he was telling me his Opihi research was essentially little data loggers along a shoreline to basically monitor when the water would hit these heights from sea level, and use that data to correlate with the pihi population in that area. So you can say this type of tidal zone has this species of pihi at this kind of density. Right? So being able to monitor that, and those are essentially data loggers. So he had to go pick him up after and connect to the computer and download it into an Excel sheet. Now, if they were constantly connected to the computer, you can see everything that's happening, and also because they're cheaper, you can deploy it at a larger scale and use it for many different applications as well. So over here, he's interested in seeing, because a lot of these areas are dryland forests, seeing how the morning dew and the moisture that comes in through air instead of rain is affecting the local climate and the plants in that area. So using soil moisture sensors in conjunction with temperature and humidity sensors to see how much of that water will actually soak into the soil. Lots of applications. Another application that I heard this past weekend was tracking pigs. Pigs coming through properties, or even tracking hikers that are coming through private properties. Like, how do you do that? And you just use cheap sensors, and if they actuated, say, alarms and barking dog sounds, all you need is deterrence. A big issue in Hawaii's agriculture is theft and vandalism. I don't know how much it is. It's an issue on the Big Island, but on Oahu, it's a major issue, especially with the homeless population and people looking for things in the dark of night.
Another question for you. Business model. Probably not your part of the company, but
yeah, I'm the farmer on the team, right? But we are partnering with many hardware partners to essentially sell their hardware. Our business model is in the software, so we're a software company. Right now, in our pilot stage, in our beta stage, we're not charging people for our software, but we will be charging for a subscription for our software use. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. And it's a lot of older farmers are, recalcitrant. They're resistant to technology. So we're looking for different channels to access the market. And sometimes it's not talking directly to the farmer, but it's talking to a farmer association, the farm bureaus of Hawaii or other states or the U.S. Or also even talking to extension agents and university researchers for them to use this technology and vet it, and for all the farmers to be able to say, I can trust this technology and it's actually practical for my situation. Anything else? Anything else? It could be anything about farming.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, and thank Michael for coming and talking to us.
Thank you.
And next month we'll have someone that Michael actually recommended, JB Friday, who's extension agent with UH, he's a forester.
Dr. Rod.
Dr. Rod, yes.
Rapid Ohio death.
Oh, yeah.
So, an update on Rapid Ohio death.